If people are not aware, this month our readings have been focusing on key elements of transformation. That's the politically correct way of saying it in the Christian language. We have been talking about the concept of redemption and salvation. Not all aspects of it, just focusing really on the very beginning of it. Listening, the call, and what it means to start living a new life. The concept of redemption and salvation is a pretty major thing in Christianity. I think, well, I don't know about you all, but I think most folks want to go to heaven. Well, at least we want to avoid hell, right? Hell sounds like an icky place. We enter into a relationship where we try and do the right thing in order to increase pleasure and decrease punishment. Now, for all of you who are like me, I hate delayed gratification. Man, I want what I want when I want it. So the idea that I should be doing something good today so that eventually, down the line, somewhere, I would get to go to heaven, that doesn't really sell for me. The question of reward in that sort of light is really not that enticing. But what I believe and what this tradition teaches is a very simple concept, which is going to sound weird to some. To others, they'll say, wow, I really like that. People who are accepted into heaven are those that accept heaven into themselves. Now that might be confusing, but what does it mean? Well, if you go to Swedenborg's reading today, if you really don't want to be in a place of love and compassion, you're trying to somehow claim that you're growing love and compassion in your heart when instead you're in bed with the snakes and the poisonous plants and all of that fun imagery he had. We have to actually want to live heaven externally in our lives to the people who are around us if we actually ever want to enter it. Because what we look at is where we walk. Now I want to talk about what we look at, where we walk. I want to talk a little bit about Jonah. Jonah is one of my favorites in the Bible. In fact, for those who do not know, when a person is ordained, they're oftentimes asked for the Bible verse they want read at their ordination. A lot of people talk about this whole make disciples of men. A lot of them pick the call of the disciples. A lot of people pick those things. I picked Jonah. Jonah spoke to me. He encapsulated how I felt about my personal story and some ways how I feel about God. Jonah was unlike any prophets. You see, all prophets receive a call from God, right? They all have God say, go and do this. Most of the prophets say, I'm not good enough to do it. It's really scary. There's a lot of big people with weapons and swords and all sorts of bad stuff. They're going to hurt me. But God says to the prophet, no, with simply a robe, some sandals, and maybe a staff, you're going to go and talk to the people in charge and tell them exactly what they don't want to hear. And you're going to say if they don't do it, their whole kingdom's going to fall. And what is the life of the prophet? This is the funny thing about Christians. Everyone I know who goes to church thinks, hey, I'm going to go to church because it's going to make my life easier. I'm going to win the lottery. I'm going to get a good job. Everything's going to go my way. But I just sit back and look for a second at the people who really answer God's call in Scripture. You have the apostles and you have the prophets. Look at poor John the Baptist there. How did it turn out for him? Did he get ahead? Oh, it was a bad joke. I know. I'm sorry. It was a bad joke. He lost a head. It doesn't turn out very well for people. To be chosen to be an apostle, depending which apostle you look at, ended in the capital punishment. To be chosen to be a prophet could be beaten, running from soldiers, beheaded. Being a prophet, well, we'll just say I wouldn't answer the job description unless I had to. Poor Jonah, he's the smartest of all of them, isn't he? Jonah received the call, and he probably did what I would do. He ran the other way. Heck, one might even say, if you look at my story, that's exactly what I did do. Run the other way. After storms, after being thrown overboard, after being in the belly of the fish, where he has some time to contemplate. You know, notice these numbers here, by the way. 3 days. Yet again, another 3 days in the Bible. A time of transformation. After 3 days, he gives a prayer where he acknowledges that he needs to get his head right and follow what God has asked him to do. And then he was, depending on your translation, spat, vomited, or spewed upon the beach, where he then again received another call, and this time took God's message seriously. And that message was to go to Nineveh and tell them in 40 days, number 40 again, we hear these numbers all the time in the Bible. In 40 days, their city was going to be destroyed. And what did they do? They listened. If you want to know the honest truth, these are one of the few times that the people in power actually listened to the prophet. And God was like, hey, good deal. I'm not going to bring about the end. Do you know what that makes Jonah? The guy who prophesied and wasn't right. He said this is going to happen, and people listened to him, and it didn't happen. Kind of an interesting thing. He filed HR complaints, by the way, and there's the whole 4th chapter of Jonah. By the way, the entire story is really short. The 4th chapter is like 3 paragraphs. The 4th chapter of Jonah is his HR complaint. God handles it well. But the people of Nineveh, like Jonah himself, show change, show transformation, accept humility. God saw they had changed and ultimately made Jonah's statement invalid. So what in the bosom of the whale did Jonah do? He acknowledged a certain type of truth. By the way, his name is Jonah, son of Amittai. It's my best pronunciation. The word Amittai, by the way, means truth. So Jonah is the son of truth. Why does this matter? Well, this is an interesting thing. This story, by the way, for anyone who is a fan of Jewish culture and Jewish faith, is the story that is oftentimes read, I believe, Yom Kippur. It's a day of atonement. It's a statement acknowledging that what we do matters and that God forgives us. God forgives us if we listen and do the right thing. In this case, the king removed his finery. He donned sackcloth with all the other people in town. By the way, to the point, they even dressed up their animals in sackcloth. So anybody who sees the little animals running around here in jackets and so forth in the winter, what would you do if the question of your priorities in life were actually at question rather than your dog's paws freezing to the concrete? Would you dress your animal in sackcloth instead of Land's End dog gear? Anyone know what sackcloth is, by the way? We don't really see it that much. The best parallel we have would be a potato sack. Sackcloth is literally the cloth you use to make sacks out of. It is oftentimes in biblical times made of wool, but the wool that you haven't really made to be soft and happy. It is scratchy, it is itchy, it is not flexible. It's what you would put all your junk in. It's equivalent to like a bag you would use to fill all of the produce you were bringing to market. The idea of wearing sackcloth and ashes turned the entire town on their head. Everybody wore the same thing, including the animals. We live in a world, by the way, with fashion magazines, celebrity. So much of what we wear is a projection of ourselves. What does it mean to wear robes and crowns? What does it mean to wear the clothes of your profession? You know, I got collars here. Doctors have those white lab coats. Ministers, stoles. All of these are supposed to denote somehow that the people wearing these outfits are somehow different. The crowns, the wealth, the fancy shoes, all of these we like to say are about, I like the fine things, but they really promote difference. What is the value of an entire town wearing a sackcloth? From king to janitor. From king to goat. What would it mean if our president, as well as your dog, were wearing the same outfit? It's a symbol of radical inclusion of everyone. It is a symbol that everyone realizes they are not the center of the universe. They are not the center of creation. They are not the reason the world was created. They are merely playing a role in God's ultimate plan. They're clearing the fields. This symbolic dying of the world is preparing a place in our hearts and our minds so that we can actually do the good work. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have any sackcloth at home. So what can I do? What can I do with a message that's about massive equality is to look at the enemy and the friend, the high and the low, just looking at the other person and understanding their humanity. Understanding that they have pain, understanding that they have difficulty, understanding that, like you, and maybe I'm not true, but this might not be true of you, but it's true of me. Unlike some people who believe they are inherently better, most of us wake up every day just trying to make it through the day. Most of us spend every day asking questions of, how can I be better? What if we start looking at the person who's angry at us as the person having the same struggle as us? What if we can look at people who we might be putting in high esteem and say, really, they're just the same as me? What if we can destroy the notion of fandom altogether and just see one another as people? Then we have a clear field, a place where we can grow in love towards our neighbor and love towards God. But as long as we are claiming superiority over someone, or what's more often happening, we claim someone else's superiority over us. As long as we do that, our fields are not going to give rise to the true love of the Lord, the true equality. The Lord came to the earth in human form to show us something, to show us that he understood us, to show us that he has endured sin. So here's my question for you. Do you think God, do you think the divine spends time thinking about how much better it is to be God than you? I'm going to posit no. God is just trying to love. Love each person as fully and capably as the divine can, and simply asks us to do the same. So throughout this week, in moments when you are in positions of lust or in positions of power, remember that we are all wearing a sackcloth and that we truly are all equal in God's eyes. And love them in their pain and love them in their temptations. Amen.